Starship 1. My first memories of playing this game was at my local Montgomery Ward store. Back in the mid-70s or so, one of the places I used to like to go with my parents was Montgomery Ward's, mainly because they had a really cool toy department. And I remember going in through the side entrance that led right to the toy department. There was always an arcade game there, and this time it happened to be Starship 1. I instantly fell in love with this game, basically because it was a space-themed game, and the ships on it kind of remind me of the ships from Star Trek, which I was and still am really big into. I liked the idea of having like the little phaser controls and all that good stuff. It was actually a pretty challenging game for me because I was only about 10 or 11 when this game came out when I first saw it. And I used to play it quite a bit. I used to get into the bonus area where if you get a certain amount of points, you would get into like a bonus level where you had like an extended time. Gave you like 20 extra seconds or so to try to destroy more enemies. And what's cool about this game is you can hit as much as you want. It didn't really do nothing to you. But it would affect your final score to see, well, I got this amount of points, but I got hit this many times. And you would base how well you did depending on those two values. Typically, I would crash maybe 4 or 5 times. And my typical scores would range anywhere from like back then, I remember maybe 2,000 or 3,000 points. I wasn't really good at playing the game, but I really enjoyed the heck of it. I really liked the phaser sound effect. I thought that was really cool. I think that's what really drew me to this game was the sound effects mainly. And of course, I really got a kick out of all the different ships. Now, there was one little critter that runs around on there. It looks like a space worm. I'm not for sure what that's supposed to be, but I used to pretend it was that what was that thing in Star Trek? The Doomsday device. I used to pretend it was that, and I was destroying the Doomsday device when I would play this game. And the point values were pretty well in here. You know, the ship you really wanted to get was the one that looked like a Klingon cruiser. That was like 500 points. So usually I would try to save my photon torpedoes to where I would just see a Klingon ship approaching and I hit it real quick. If I did that successfully, I was guaranteed to get at least 2,000 points and maybe get closer to getting the extended play. But I remember back when the Atari 2600 released, I didn't get it for Christmas in 77. I didn't get my first Atari 600 until I think 80, 81, somewhere around in there. But I had a buddy who lived down the street from me that got an Atari 2600 when it released. And he got quite a few of the original games that launched with it, the Launch 9 or whatever they call it. And one of them was Starship. So when I saw this game, I went down to his house after opening up all my presents to see what he got. I had to see what the game was like. And it wasn't bad. I knew it wasn't going to be like the arcade version. Because I was really familiar with, my Fairchild Channel F and what the graphics capability was on that. There was a game on it that I liked to play. That was called, it was like a Starship type game as well, but I can't remember what it was called. And it was actually kind of cool too. But on the 2600, they did a fairly decent job of converting this arcade game over to the 2600. It takes a little time to get used to controlling it. The easiest level, of course, is playing level 1, where everything just comes at you really slow. And whereas what's different from the arcade game to the 2600 is if you don't destroy the ship when it's towards the center of the screen, it'll hit you and it'll deduct points from your score. So you got to make sure you either hit it or move it off to the side as quick as possible so you don't lose any points. On the upper levels, you can make the objects approach you much faster. It's a much more challenging game. And the ultimate challenging game is to have double objects on the screen. That really gets kind of hairy, trying to destroy those crazy things. And of course, on the 2600, it was well known for having all kinds of different game variations. So you had other games like Warp Drive on here, and another one called Lunar Lander. Wasn't really Lunar Lander. It was basically just put your ship over the top of this rock and hit your fire button, and it would disappear, and you do it all over again. But still, it was a really, really fun game. Now, just a while back, I saw this article by Ed Fries talking about the first known Easter egg in an arcade game. So this was Starship 1. And it was confirmed by the designer, Ron Miller, that by activating the machine's controls in a certain sequence, it would display "Hi, Ron," and let the player, have you get some free games. I never knew about this. I didn't know about this until I read this article by Ed Fries. Now I want to find an original Starship 1 so I can try this out so I can actually see the message. But if you go to Ed Fries' blog, he has a whole write-up where he actually looks at the code of the game, and he actually goes and buys a game and does all this stuff. It's actually a really great article to read. So I'll put a link to that down in the show notes. So now let's take a look at what came in the box for the Atari 2600 version. Well, let's take a look at the box for Starship. 17 video games. Along with Starship, you have Warp Drive and Lunar Lander, but we're going to talk about the Starship game. Right off the bat, this is some awesome artwork. I love this space battle scene. It is so awesome. This is one of the original 9 games that launched with the Atari 2600 back in '77. CX2603 Combat was number 1. Don't remember what number 2 was. It was number 3 in the library at the time. Really like these early boxes, especially the original launch 9, because they were pretty cool. They weren't your normal boxes. These had what you call gatefolds. They would open up like a book, and you have your instruction manual on one side, and the cartridge would fit inside of a nice little sleeve, little indentation here. I love these type of boxes on the Atari 2600. They are pretty cool. Of course, on the side, it gives you a description of the game. Has a nice big 03 right there. On the back, shows you all the game variations. Now, in later releases of the Atari 2600 games, they put like screenshot stuff back here. But on the earlier ones, they actually put the selection menu on the back, so you don't have to open up the manual. You just pop the box out, flip it over. See all the different game variations. Of course, here's Warp Drive, and then here's the Lunar Lander type game. Actually gives you the points value as well on the back. That's pretty awesome. So let's take a look at the manual itself. So the Starship Manual, of course, has the same artwork on the front of as the front of the box, which is nice. I love the font they use on these instruction manuals as well. Inside, of course, we have a nice full color manual. As you know, I love full color manuals. Talks about how to use the controller, all good stuff, what you can destroy, what you can't destroy, all the point values for the different enemies. Some of the enemies that they have directly from the arcade port, like the Starfighter, the Flying Saucer. The Space Robot looks a bit different. I'm not seeing the Space Module, though. Talks about the one-player games, all the different variations, two-player games, the Warp Drive game, and, of course, the Lunar Lander game, which is not Lunar Lander as you would think it is. Basically, you just get your lander over the top of the little moon thing here, hit your button, it disappears, and you do it all over again. You just have to avoid these little things flying through space. So it's not a Lunar Lander per se, but it's still kind of cool. And of course, on the back, you have your full color game select matrix. Awesome. Now, the mode I like to play is mode number 3, which gives you asteroids or meteors in there. You get the robots, all this good stuff. Now, mode 4 is kind of fun too, where it just doubles everything up. And that throws more stuff on the screen at once. And, like you saw in the video, you have to make sure you destroy what's on the screen. Otherwise, it's going to hit you and you lose points. So either hit it or get it off the screen as fast as you can so you don't run into it. Such a great game. Let's look at the cartridge. Cartridge is pretty plain. This is the text label. Gives all the different games on here. Nice little end label with the 03 on there, so you know it's from the original Launch 9. Atari did some really good work with their cartridges. I mean, these things are iconic. They're pretty cool. Put that back in there. Put that back in there as well. Boop! So that was Starship on the old Atari 2600. A favorite arcade game of mine and a favorite Atari arcade game on my 2600 as well. What are your thoughts on the Starship, the arcade game, or Starship, the Atari 2600 game? Put your comments down below. Thanks for watching.